You cannot hide your beauty for long. It was a gift from the gods, and it will one day send kings to war. That night, King Idehen regained consciousness. The entire palace was filled with excitement and there was jubilation. The king asked his servants exactly what had happened, and they told him that he had been unconscious for the past 5 days after he was assassinated by someone in the forest. King Idehen was surprised. He told them that he was not assassinated, rather, he was mistakenly shot by a female hunter before he became unconscious. The servants were shocked. They told the king that the young maiden had been locked up in the palace since the day of the incident. King Idehen felt bad without even knowing who Ivie was. The king ordered them to release her immediately once it's daybreak. That night, Ivie's condition grew worse. The maids rushed her to the herbalist again. Everyone in the palace were scared. They wished for nothing bad to happen to her because they would be held accountable for locking up an innocent girl without food. The herbalist administered some herbs, and after a while, she became stable. The next morning, the servant told King Idehen what had happened, and he quickly rushed to the herbalist to see her. On getting there, he saw Ivie lying on the mat. King Idehen was speechless because he had never seen anyone beautiful as Ivie. He stared at her for a long time. Her beauty struck him, and he started wondering who she was and why he had never seen her before. He stayed with her for a long while until his attention was needed at the palace. King Idehen instructed some of the maids to stay with Ivie and notify him once she wakes up. He told the herbalist to make sure nothing bad happened to her. Later that day, Ivie woke up. The king was immediately informed and he went to see her. King Idehen apologized for all that they did to her and promised to look after her. He asked Ivie who she was. Ivie introduced herself to him and asked to see her auntie Afiangbe. King Idehen immediately ordered the servants to go and get her. Afiangbe was very happy to see Ivie and she requested to take her home, but King Idehen refused. He said she would be his responsibility till she recovered fully. Ivie was scared, but her auntie encouraged her and assured her that King Idehen was not a bad man and that she would be safe with him. The young king was carried away by Ivie's beauty and arranged a very beautiful chamber for her to stay in the palace, where he visited her often. Not too long, the young king and Ivie became very close. They shared their views about life and found out that they had a lot in common. King Idehen had no wife and children at the time, and he respected Ivie and admired her bravery. Even when Ivie was fit to go home, King Idehen came up with one excuse after another, just to keep her in the palace. Ivie was adorned like a princess in the palace, and everyone loved her and the way she made the king happy. Soon, their feelings for each other grew stronger, and the king could not hold back. He told Ivie what he felt and asked her to marry him. Ivie was so happy and she accepted. Her auntie Afiangbe was so happy with the way things turned out. She was so proud of Ivie as she would be bringing great honor to their household. Few market days passed, Ivie and King Idehen got married and she became the queen of Ekwari. The people loved her so much as she was a great queen to them. They both loved each other and ruled their subjects gloriously. The kingdom became very prosperous and filled with love. On the other hand, the Enogi of Idumu died and his son Asemosa was crowned king. He was worse than his father and more cruel to women. Just like his father, he had several wives and children, but he was very close to his first daughter, who was just like him. King Asemota was very evil to the extent people secretly started leaving the village. When he heard of this, he closed all the borders and instructed the warriors to kill anyone who ever attempts to leave the village. This action, however, affected the trade in the village. In Idumu, there lived a very beautiful girl named Itohan. Itohan was from a very humble background. She was hardworking, loved, and was engaged to her childhood love, Idemudia. When King Asemota heard of her, he asked her to be one of his concubines, but Itohan refused. On her wedding day, King Asemota seized her and kept her in his chamber as one of his slaves. He had his way with her whenever he wanted, and this act was supported by his daughter Etinosa. King Asemota humiliated her in all possible ways. Itohan was not allowed to leave the palace or see any visitor. Idemudia tried all he could, but it was to no avail. Itohan continued to live in the palace, wishing for the day she would be free. The village became poor. King Asemota began slave trade. He began to attack villages, selling captured prisoners as slaves. A lot of villages tried to protect their territory, but they were outnumbered by the warriors and weapons. The people of Idumu hated King Asemota because slave trade was not what they were known for. But the king was carried away by his selfish desires. Not too long, they invaded Egwari and took some villagers as prisoners, which included Queen Ivie's cousins, Afiangbe's sons. The news broke Ivie and Afiangbe. King Idehe had to intervene, and so he decided to meet with King Asemota, as he did not want to take the violent way. Queen Ivie asked to follow her husband, as Idumu was also her home. King Idehe refused at first, because he did not want anything bad to happen to her. Queen Ivie continued, stating that if she presents herself as the daughter of the soil, King Asemota may reconsider his actions and extend a hand of peace. King Idehe and Queen Ivie prepared for the journey. They took some warriors with them and embarked on the journey to Idumu. When they got to Idumu, King Idehe requested for the presence of King Asemota. King Idehe pleaded for the release of his people, not because he was weak, but because he wanted them all alive. King Asemota refused and told him that they would remain his slaves. King Idehe was angry. Just when he was about to draw his sword, Ivie walked into the room and stopped him. When King Asemota saw her, he was dumbfounded. He gazed at her and could not take his eyes off her. Queen Ivie introduced herself and begged Asemota to have mercy and set her people free. But Asemota continued to stare at her because he had never seen anyone as beautiful in his entire life. After a while, he agreed to let the prisoners go, but on one condition. In exchange for your people's freedom, you will give me your wife, and she will become mine, King Asemota said. King Idehe was angry. He drew out his sword to cut off Asemota's tongue, but he was surrounded by guards. He rejected the condition and went back to Egware with Ivie. Everyone in the village was troubled, as they felt unsafe. Few days later, Asemota launched another attack on Egware and they declared war. Egware was not prepared enough. They haven't fought any battle for ages. Their warriors were very few. Meanwhile, King Asemota had hundreds of warriors and lots of weapons. Before the war began, King Idehe held a meeting with the elders and chiefs of the land. He told them that if anything should happen to him in battle, Queen Ivie should become the ruler of Egware. This was strange as no woman had ever ruled in Egwari before, and they decided to consult the gods before accepting. King Idehe was a very skilled warrior. He was confident that he was going to defeat the enemy. The battle line was drawn and the war began. During that time, all the women gathered in the palace with Queen Ivie, praying for their husbands, brothers, and sons. Unknown to King Idehen, there were traitors in his camp. Some of his warriors had struck a deal with King Asemuta to kill him in exchange for their family's freedom. On the battlefield, they drew out their sword and slayed King Idehen. When this happened, some of the warriors of Egwari withdrew from the battlefield because they realized that there were traitors amongst them. They ran to Queen Ivie and told her everything that had happened. Ivie knew danger was coming to her and the palace. She had no time to weep for her husband. She quickly re-strategized. She lit a huge fire and waited for the arrival of King Asemuta and what the bid her father gave to her. Meanwhile, at Idumun, Idemudia succeeded in rescuing Itohan, and they captured Etinosa and fled to Egwari. Immediately King Asemuta entered the palace to capture Queen Ivie. The palace gates was shut. Ivie started shouting, calling out for help in a burning room. King Asemuta rushed in to get her, and the maids locked the door and increased the fire, and the room was blown up by the fire. King Asemuta was burnt, but Ivie came out unharmed because of the fortified bead her father gave to her. When the warriors heard of what had happened, they fled as their king was no more. All the slaves were freed and the traitors executed. Ivie reunited with her cousins once again. The chiefs and elders were amazed at Ivie's bravery. They had no choice than to honor her husband's last wish, and she was crowned the new ruler of Egwari. Ivie mourned her husband for a long time, after which she discovered that she was with child. The people were so happy because King Idehe's legacy would continue, and Queen Ivie ruled them gloriously and the kingdom continued to flourish. Etinosa became Itohan's slave, and she suffered for all the evil she had ever done. This is the end of this story. Thank you for listening to this story. If you want us to make more videos, hit on the like and subscribe button below and comment which country you are watching from. We love and appreciate you. Bye.